Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 17th of September, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. That includes warnings, watches, and advisories, as well as a look at the satellite picture, the radar picture, perhaps tidal information, or just a look at the marine forecast for the next day. You can find all of that at weather.gov/Alaska. The weather info line is open as well, and when you dial that number, make sure you've got a pen and pencil together, or a pen and paper together, because you can write down the numbers if you haven't done this in a while, so that next time you don't have to listen to all the prompts. You can just punch, 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 and off you go. 800-472-0391 is the weather info line number for Alaska. Of course, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube during the day. On Facebook, the National Weather Service office in Juneau just shared some information that we'll share with you here at Alaska Weather, but it's another way to get information during the day and in between the Alaska Weather shows. On Twitter, of course, if you've been following the events from Chile, you were able to see a lot of the National Weather Service tsunami warning centers alerts and advisories that were mainly focused on places like Southern California, where they might have seen a little bit of a tsunami there, a little bit of a rise, but really the impacts there and the forecasts were the most important part as we were watching that event unfold. And if you were on Twitter, you could certainly see that just about every hour since the earthquake yesterday afternoon. On YouTube, of course, you can get your daily afternoon map briefing with the surface maps that you'll see here in just a minute. Now, if you have been in South Central, the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak, southwestern Alaska, anywhere really south of the Alaska Range, and certainly in southeast, it has been a pretty soggy September for many locations there. And that weather continues on. The soggy September will continue its slog for most of the panhandle there. You can see the orange and red colors indicating more precipitation through the 20th, early in the morning between 2 and as high as 4 inches of rainfall. Probably some higher isolated amounts. As the next wave of wet weather comes in, it's going to wring out not only wet weather, but probably allow some gusty winds, especially across some of the inner coastal areas of southern parts of the panhandle. Now, not to be forgotten would be the interior. You're still getting some rainfall. A lot of that has trended down a little bit in the last couple days. We got a break in the wetter weather yesterday in South Central, but as we go into the next 24 hours, another round of rain is coming your way, and it will be more showery in nature, but it could still be a little bit more on the wet side than what you would normally see with some of the lighter rain events that we typically see in the interior parts of Alaska. Now, what about some of that snow? Well, snow levels are coming down. They've been hovering around, I believe, about 3,000 to 4,000 feet across the interior. The fine forecasters in Fairbanks, try saying that 5 times fast, say snow levels are coming down for the interior, and especially around the middle Tanana Valley and the hillsides and domes on the outskirts of the valley. Could come down as low as about 1,500 feet as we head into Friday night and Saturday. So you will see some new snow on the ridge tops up there in the coming days, and watch for those freezing and snow levels to continue to drop as we head toward the weekend. They certainly continue to drop up across the North Slope, where we could see some of the higher amounts there, about 1 to 2, maybe 3 inches there along the Dalton Highway and some of the higher elevations of the Brooks Range slopes as we go into the next couple days. Now, we're talking about the wind. And the folks in Juneau, the forecasters there, looking at the wind for the next wave coming in across southeast. We're going to see some probably high-end gales there as we get into the next 24 hours or so. As that next area, the triple point low, swings in across the coastal, the inner coastlines, I should say, especially the Clarence Strait and through the Dixon Entrance. We're going to see winds that are upwards of 40 to probably 50 knots. You can see the orange, even the hints of the yellow and the orange showing up there across the Clarence Strait. So watch for the wind to come up there. Should be a pretty brief event, and mainly focused on the southern third of the inner coastlines there as we go into tomorrow and tomorrow night, and then things should quickly improve. Most of the storm looks like it will be headed south, and that's exactly what you would have seen if you had checked Facebook already. Perhaps you have. Thanks for doing that. Here's a look at the Bering Sea satellite picture, and once again you can see we're still locked in a northerly flow across the western parts of Alaska. For the central and eastern parts of the chain, fairly quiet weather, a few gusts from time to time, but nothing really to write home about just yet. And even the wetter weather has taken a break as high pressures trying to lock in around Attu and Adak and Atka. Down across the south, though, you can see in the southern part of the picture that we've got more typhoon or tropical weather just sitting off the eastern coast of Japan and China. As this continues working northward, once again we'll get an opportunity to taste some of that tropical weather. The question, of course, is a week away or more, where is that plume of moisture going to stretch? Will it hover across the southern Gulf and mainly affect southeast? Will it travel a little bit further north and affect more of southwest and south central Alaska? Time will tell, and so will the jet stream position. We'll check on that here in just a few minutes. In the meantime, a look at all of Alaska shows the jet stream influence on the moisture at hand, and that is spinning up a new area of low pressure here across the southern Gulf and about to send that into southern parts of southeast. This is the system that will bring the wind into southern parts of southeast around the Clarence Strait there, with stronger winds developing as we head into tonight and tomorrow, and then easing up as we head into tomorrow night. Now, the bulk of that will bring rain and wind to the southern third of southeast, and many areas around southeast will see the rain pick up, but the strongest amount of rain and wind probably across the southern third. For many in south central, southwest, the southern Alaska range, and out across the southwestern Capes, another round of rain has been moving through. This is working itself northward into the interior and becoming a little more showery in nature rather than just widespread rain working northward into the hills. As a result, there will be some more rainfall across the interior for the next 24 to 48 hours. And as the system tracks into the central and western Yukon, this is going to pull in colder air, so there still should be moisture lingering around the interior, but when that cold air marches in, those snow levels start to drop, and so we'll see those levels start out around 3,000 feet or so like they are today, and then gradually descend to about 1,500 feet, and you will notice that, and we'd love to see your pictures if you'd like to send them to me. Just find our email address on our website, and we'll certainly see what we can do, or tag us on Facebook, and we'll take a look at those there, perhaps share a few of your best pictures as you share those with us on Facebook or Twitter. We'd love to see that. Just simply tag us with AKwx. Here's a look at the surface weather map now, and the low pressure system that we're watching to bring the wind to southeast still well out at sea at 1,001 millibars. Again, nothing very exciting unless you look at the jet stream, and that is, again, adding that extra punch to the system as it swings around. A 989 millibar low hovering over south central and Prince William Sound, just stirring up the rainfall here. It doesn't look very impressive on the map, but it has been another wet day for many parts of the Kenai Peninsula, the Anchorage Bowl, and the Matanuska and Susitna Valleys. Colder air lurking just south of the Brooks Range. Hasn't made a whole lot of progress southward just yet, but boy does it want to. The Arctic is gearing up for business there. It keeps trying to get organized, and it is. There's new ice forming about 350 nautical miles north of Barrow. At 993 millibars, low pressure will swing into the outer coast tonight for southeastern Alaska, with that rain and wind start to turn up for some of the intercoastal waterways. Across Prince William Sound and south central, more rainfall there, a little more showery in nature the further north you go. And rain and snow showers may mix along the upper Yukon Valley. Snow showers continue for the eastern Brooks Range as well as Kaktovik out toward Atkasuk and just east of Barrow, where you'll see more clouds than anything else. Showers of snow still possible tomorrow afternoon across the north slope and generally to about the foothills of the Brooks Range. Other than that, south you go, and it's all rainfall for the interior, for the Matanuska Valley, for the Prince William Sound region, as well as a large part of southeastern Alaska. As that frontal boundary blows through quickly, the winds will gradually subside, but it does look to be a fairly blustery night developing, especially early tomorrow morning, and then conditions will gradually improve as that system passes through. The bulk of that, again, will be traveling to the south of the Panhandle. A northerly wind coming down the west coast brings showers there, mainly rain showers, and looks like a decent opportunity for some light rain around the Alaska Peninsula, as well as areas closer to Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, and Nikolsky, and out across the west. And take a look across eastern Asia. Out here across the eastern part of the continent, a new wave of cold air is dropping southward. That should just make a beeline for the west coast as we head into Saturday. The winds ahead of that should tighten up across the Alaska Peninsula, so gustier conditions probably developing here on Saturday. Nice bright spot developing in the sky from the Seward Peninsula down toward Bristol Bay by Saturday. It will be brief as clouds should quickly fill back in. And then across the central and upper parts of the Yukon Valley, snow showers should develop. It doesn't look like any major accumulation right now, but it will be cold enough to support at least some rain and snow, and perhaps all snow by Saturday for those rain and snow showers there. And then across the north slopes of the Alaska Range, probably more of a rain and snow shower mix. And then south of the passes and into south central and Prince William Sound, we're talking about a little better chance for rainfall there as 989 millibar low pressure system hovers in the northern Gulf, and a new wave here is generated just south and east of the Queen Charlotte's and Haida Gwaii, with periods of rainfall really focusing on the heavier amounts there just out of reach of southeastern Alaska. So a lot going on there, very active pattern, and even with the rain and clouds and cool weather, we still have temps in the mid-50s for southeast today. Juneau made it to about 50 degrees. Upper 40s and lower 50s around Prince William Sound. South Central saw a cooler day in some places like Homer, only 43 today. 46 in Kenai, a hair cooler in Anchorage, 52 up around Talkeetna, a little bit out of the rain for a while today, 50 around Golcana and Northway, 46 for Fairbanks with temps in the 30s for Healy, 45 in Eagle, 46 in Fort Yukon, 27 for Anaktuvuk Pass, Arctic Village only in the mid-30s today, 20s and 30s for the Arctic coast, all the way from Atkasuk to Kaktovik to Barrow at 28 to Wainwright at 32, Kivalina 41, Kotzebue lower 40s for you, Shishmaref at 45, 48 for Nome, Galena had 42 degrees, Tanana 40 with McGrath at 44, Bethel in the lower 40s, Nunivak Island 43, St. Lawrence Island and Gamble at 39. The same goes for Tin City today. And out around the Pribilovs, it was in the upper 40s, warmer than that around Kodiak at 54. Most of Bristol Bay hovering at or just below the 50-degree mark. King Salmon right there on the money. 40s for a large part of the Alaska Peninsula. One place that made it above was Sand Point at 52. About the same temperature there for Adak and Atka, as well as Shemya this afternoon at 3 o'clock. Overnight low temperatures will stay just above freezing for most stations there across the central and eastern and even the western interior. Southwestern temperatures will make it into the upper 30s from Bethel all the way into Bristol Bay. 43 in Kodiak with temperatures in southeast in the upper 40s and lower 50s. South central dropping into the upper 30s again. There were some places in eastern sections of the Anchorage Bowl as well as in the Matanuska and Susitna valleys that were clearly in the mid-30s this morning, so a cool start there. Upper 20s for most of the Arctic coast, 30 around Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse, 31 in Kaktovik, but all stations there look to be below freezing. And most of the Aleutians and the peninsula will be looking at temperatures in the 40s there, with Bristol Bay again just above freezing. High temps tomorrow should warm into the mid-40s to lower 50s for a large part of the YK, Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, and the chain with southeast back in the mid to upper 50s. A little bit warmer for areas like Ketchikan and Annette, but that will be a warm and wet day for you as we go through your Friday. South Central closer to 50 degrees. The Middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks in the mid-40s tomorrow. A little bit further north toward Ambler and Bettles, you're looking at temperatures closer to that 40-degree mark. Going over Anaktuvuk Pass, look for a high of 28. Lower 30s for the Arctic coast, 32 in Barrow, 36 in Kotzebue, and 43 in Nome for your Friday. IFR conditions should prevail for a large part of the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, as well as the foothills and close to the summits around the northern slopes of the Brooks Range, but conditions will continue to improve from west to east as you're looking at tomorrow afternoon here. For southeast, look for IFR conditions along some of the higher terrain with improving conditions for areas out around Cross Sound and into the southern tip of the outer coastline as you get out toward Craig and Klawock. Look for improvement there during the day. Around Portage Pass and northward toward Valdez, expect MVFR conditions by the afternoon, as well as most of the Alaska Range passes. The Bering Sea coast from Bristol Bay southward all the way out toward the central chain, also expected to see MVFR through most of the day. Anaktuvuk Pass, we expect to see IFR again for your Friday. Same goes for Adigan Pass tomorrow. Do watch for snow showers there, and again, the snow line will be dropping. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see IFR to start today, but some improvements will be seen. MVFR expected to hold around Rainy Pass for your Friday, as well as Windy Pass. And Isabel Pass, we'll see conditions start out at IFR, but improvements should be seen as we go through the day. Mentasta Pass, we expect visual flight rule there for your day. Tanita Pass holding at marginal restrictions during most of the afternoon. Portage Pass should start at IFR. Some improvements will be seen during the day there, and watch for more rain. Chilkoot and White Pass also expected to stay listed as IFR through most of your day. Always check the FAA webcams before you go and follow that flight plan. Here's a look at your freezing levels, and the colder air is kind of on hold at the moment. Not a big change really from what we've seen yesterday. 2,000-foot freezing levels holding right over the YK and then just along the Yukon Valley. 4,000 to 6,000 foot levels from the Copper River Basin and the eastern interior extend into southeastern Alaska, with the 8,000 foot level holding just south of the Dixon entrance. Out across the west, you can see that colder air is kind of spread out across the Bering. 4,000 to 6,000 foot freezing levels for the central and western chain. Icing potential is still holding up around 6,000 to 7,000 feet for most areas there, a little bit lower north of the Brooks Range, above 3,000 feet, where we saw plenty of reports today along the coast for moderate to isolated clear and rime. So we were seeing that above 3,000 feet, mostly around the 4,000 foot level, it seemed like. And for southeast, we're going to keep those levels above 6,000 to 9,000 feet for a large part of the day. And some of that, again, could reach occasional moderate. So be on your guard there and make sure you're checking the weather before you go. The jet stream level shows that that large dip in the jet, that fast-moving river of air, is allowing the colder air to move across the Gulf of Alaska. Wind speeds just crank up across the Gulf to about 120 knots. And if you remember on the surface weather chart, there's a low pressure system right about here now. By tomorrow, it's going to be over here, and all of this jet stream energy is just spinning that up, kind of like a top, putting your hand on the side of it and making it go. It's exactly what the jet stream is doing here. And we're feeding moisture into that weather pattern with that jet stream just to the south, and all of those ingredients combined help to really juice up that surface weather. So right now, southeast is in prime position to at least get a taste of some of that stronger weather that's developing as we head through tonight and tomorrow. At 9,000 feet, you can see the wave of low pressure working its way eastward. The northerly winds on the west side of that between 20 and 30 knots. On the south side, 30 to 35 knots, and lighter winds across the interior with a northeasterly flow across the northern coast. A little bit more northerly coming into Barrow and Prudhoe Bay at 10 knots there. The westerlies, or northerlies I should say, continue from the north with 25 to 35 knots along the west coast. Southwesterlies over the Gulf at 3,000 feet, still holding at 25 knots. Turbulence, we're going to watch for areas along the capes and the passes below 4,000 feet, same as it was yesterday. Maybe a few more bumps across the western tip of the Seward Peninsula and closer to Kotzebue and Kivalina. Also across the lee side of the Brooks Range below 4,000 feet, around Portage and the western parts of Prince William Sound, and also across southeastern Alaska during the daytime below 5,000 feet. Watch for bumps, and occasional moderate will be possible there as the system's working through. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with a look at your sea ice update and your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
The false dawn of Omar Khayyam.
Welcome to Stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. It's nearing that time of year again when we talk about the false dawn of Omar Khayyam.
That's right, James. Almost 1,000 years ago, the Persian poet Omar Khayyam, in his book of poetry, The Rubaiyat, wrote his most famous line: "A jug of wine, a loaf of bread, and thou beside me singing in the wilderness." But elsewhere in the Rubaiyat, Omar made a poetic allusion to a mysterious false dawn, which can only be seen at a certain time of year.
And this year, as we approach the beginning of autumn, the week leading up to September 22nd is your best chance to see it for 2015, because there will be no bright moonlight to overpower this delicate astronomical phenomenon. So, let's take a trip into space and see what we're talking about. Okay, if we could go way out into space and look down on our solar system with superhuman vision, we would notice a faint, almost imperceptible, vast cloud extending outward from the Sun in the plane of the orbits of Mercury, Venus, Earth, and slightly beyond. An enormous cloud of cosmic dust.
Now, while one would expect it would be impossible to see this super faint cloud from Earth, nevertheless, in September, when the plane of our Earth's orbit is almost vertical to the horizon, we can, under the right conditions.
And those conditions require that there is no moonlight, and that you must be far away from city lights, because even the faintest moonlight or urban lighting will wipe out the extremely delicate ethereal glow of the false dawn. As a general rule, if you can see the Milky Way from where you're observing, you'll have a good chance to see it. To find it, look toward the east about 2 hours before sunrise, before the real dawn. It will look like a dim, cone-shaped patch of light about the same brightness as the Milky Way. It will extend from the horizon about 1/3 to halfway up to the zenith. a ghostly, faintly glowing, rounded pyramid of light.
If you notice, the Milky Way is at an angle to this faint band of light. However, the Milky Way will be there all night long, while the false dawn will only appear as dawn approaches. Again, that's about 2 hours before sunrise.
Now, the scientific name of this phenomenon is the zodiacal light, and it's caused by sunlight scattering from all those trillions and trillions of dust particles which make up the great cosmic cloud, close to the sun, lying in the plane of the planets.
And while you're out there looking for the false dawn, look over to the right and notice the early morning return of the stars of winter. Orion the Hunter, the brilliant star Sirius and Canis Major, and the twins of Gemini, Castor and Pollux, which will give you a good idea of where the top of this cone of light should be.
And if you look a bit farther to the left, you'll be able to see the Big Dipper rising in the northeastern sky.
And although Omar didn't mention it, this false dawn also has an evening counterpart, the false dusk, the evening zodiacal light, which looks pretty much the same, except that it's visible 2 hours after sunset in the west, in March, when the plane of our Earth's orbit is almost vertical to the horizon.
Additionally, if you ever see a similar oval-shaped glow directly overhead at midnight, you would be seeing the zodiacal light's sister phenomenon called the Gegenschein, or counterglow. I sometimes wonder whether any poet ever wrote about that.
At any rate, remember that September is the month to see the false dawn of Omar Khayyam, the morning zodiacal light, which I admit is very elusive.
But once you've found it, I think you'll know why it appeared in poetry centuries before it appeared in scientific writings.
So get outside before dawn this week and be sure you're far from city lights and see if you are as inspired as an ancient Persian poet. Keep looking up.
Well, temperatures are dropping, and so are the sea surface temperatures. Around Barrow, those numbers have dropped to about minus 0.6. That is cold enough for ice. And for many of you along the northern coast, you've probably seen some ice in the morning, and if you checked in the afternoon, that ice was gone. That process will continue to repeat over and over until it sticks, and then the ice will still be there. But right now, the main ice that's growing is about 350 nautical miles north of Barrow, so we're not seeing a whole lot of growth anywhere really close to home that's permanent just yet. But we still have a thin sliver of last year's ice sitting just east of Prudhoe Bay and just west of Kaktovik. That is the main story there. You can always check out the latest ice trends, the map, the discussion, and outlook anytime from our sea ice experts at weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. Now, for the wind in southeast, remember we were talking about the winds coming up in the southern parts of the Clarence Strait and working through fairly quickly. Starting late tonight and into tomorrow, we're going to start to see higher gusts, 40-knot sustained winds coming through from the south with a 9-foot sea. Considerably lesser winds working northward, so the main focus is going to be somewhat brief and across the extreme southern parts of the intercoastal areas. Otherwise, it's an onshore flow for most areas from Yakutat to south of Sitka, 20 to 25 knots with an 8 to 9-foot sea, 11-foot seas developing just offshore of Craig and Kloak. For Saturday, a much improved situation for most cases. You're looking at 25 knots across the north and the outer coast, 8 to 9-foot seas there. Otherwise, 15-knot winds on the inside with 3 to 4-foot seas, and southwesterlies coming into the outer coast at 15 knots with 8-foot seas on Saturday. So the system blows through fairly quickly, as you'll see. For Friday, south and easterly flows coming into Prince William Sound. Winds remain light there, and inside of Cook Inlet, a westerly flow cutting across the Barrens as well as Kodiak Island at 25 to 30 knots with 7 to as high as 9-foot seas across the western Gulf. For Saturday, winds become a little more north and northwesterly, cutting across the Barrens at 20 to 25 knots, 6 to 7-foot seas. There are light winds inside and outside of Prince William Sound. Northwesterly wind east of Kodiak Island with a 7-foot sea, and northwesterlies inside of Cook Inlet with 2 to 3-foot seas. Winds there only 10 to 15 knots. Across the Alaska Peninsula, the strongest winds will be between Chignik and Castle Cape at 30 knots with a 9-foot sea. Otherwise, northwesterlies inside of Bristol Bay with a 7-foot sea and slightly higher seas there south of King Cove. For Saturday, look for northwesterlies to pick up a little bit more inside of Bristol Bay and again across the peninsula with 25 to 30 knot winds in all areas. The highest seas north of Cold Bay down the Bering Sea coast with a 10-foot sea expected on Saturday. West winds become more north and westerly there for Friday across the Aleutians, 20 to 25 knots in the east and about the same in the west with a 7-foot sea. A light and variable wind still with 5-foot seas south of Adak and Atka on Friday. That becomes northwesterly at times on Saturday. Westerlies also south and west of Nikolsky, and the strongest winds generally north of Unalaska and Dutch Harbor at 25 knots with a 9-foot sea on Saturday. Across the west, a northerly flow coming down on the west side of that low pressure system. Look for 10-foot seas at the highest around St. Matthew and north of Nunivak Island, 7 to 9-foot seas from the Kuskokwim out toward St. Paul and St. George, I should say, with 9-foot seas there and a 25-knot wind. That quickly turns to the west as the next wave of low pressure passes through. Look for 8-foot seas around the Pribilofs, northwesterlies around St. Lawrence, and 8-foot seas around the St. Matthew Island waters on Saturday. Across the North Slope, easterlies coming across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, northeasterlies coming down the Chukchi at 20 knots with 4 to 5-foot seas there, 7-foot seas outside of Kotzebue Sound. That diminishes substantially by Saturday with a northeasterly flow and a 3-foot sea. 3-foot seas across most of the Beaufort and Chukchi Seacoast for Saturday with winds diminishing in all areas to about 15 knots at their highest. Recapping tonight's weather, rain continues for south central, southwest, and certainly southeastern Alaska as you brace for a dose of wind that should quickly move through starting tonight and into tomorrow. You'll see those gusts coming up over 45 to 50 knots briefly, especially across the southern inner channels there in the inner coastal areas. Watch for that to quickly blow through on Friday with cooler air setting into the interior this weekend. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.